Hello everybody, Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan Living Life with Purity. And today I'm going to go back over a little bit from my last podcast talking about cults. And cults aren't the end of the story when it comes to how organizations are made up and how their administration of authority and power comes down the line. I talked a lot about, the church cults and things like this, and then cults within cults. But outside of the church, there's also cults in our everyday world. And one of these that we're dealing with and really affects our nation's comfort and security, and not only ours, but the world also, with these tremendous amount of deaths that they're creating, are the cartels out of Mexico and in Europe that run drugs and do human trafficking and all sorts of other things. Now, back in the day, we used to just call them all Mafia or, crime types. Well, it's far more than that now. It's become a cultural identity and a way of life for these folks. Now, I'll drill down on the Mexican cartels specifically. Now, what the Mexican cartels have done is they've taken the cult organizational chart and they've put it to use for bad means, and this is all about driving money into their leaders' pockets. Now, that's a key part of these cults in our modern day world, is the folks at the top are always being paid these tributes. And these are, whether it be a truckload of cash or whatever it is that's being exchanged, is given to the lead guy as an honor payment to keep them from ordering their head be cut off or them being exterminated. Because this is how cults and cartels can work many times. So, and the Mafia certainly did for years, and that's probably what most people know about from story times and movies and things like that. But it's very, very true. So, in these cartel situations, it all starts off with young men, young boys, starting off that might be poor. Their families may be disengaged with their communities. They're just scrapping out a living. And what they do is they ostracize them from anything to have to do with a God or a spiritual life at all. And they are pretty much taking these things down to the lowest possible level of life and its existence. There's no God, there's no reason. You have nothing to live for. Once this is over, it's done. Got that, amigo? And so these young men are raised up with no image of God, no image of hope in their lives. They only can do is scratch out a daily existence and do what is told of them. Otherwise, their life will come to an end very abruptly. And this is their reality. This is their truth. And this is the understanding that they live by. And this is where a lot of times people with Western thinking or with a spiritual life are disengaged from the discussion because they can't understand how it is that these people can do such things. Because to their mind and thinking, how could anyone be that bad? Aren't they worried about God? No, they're not. They don't think that God exists, and they think that all of it is a foolish attempt at trying to support one's moral compass. We're seeing this a lot with about 25% of our own population in this country right now that want to shut down any respect at all for religious training or religious thought if it invades and does not support their thinking about how their reality needs to be. Because these people just want comforts, they just want an easy life, they just want to have things their way all the time. And we all know that this goes against God's plan, but when they don't have God in their life or a consideration, it doesn't matter to them. So realize who you're dealing with here and try not to be too empathetic to some of these things, because you're wasting your valuable time and seed on unfertile ground. We can pray for them, we can do all sorts of things, but we can't let them drive the narrative. We can't let them take up all the oxygen in the room when that's happening. So This is all part of knowing who you are and standing on that ground and being adamant about that. So these Mexican cartels, they have this godless existence. They have no care, no concern for you or anybody else because their life can end in any moment. These folks are running around very raw and very animalistic in their thinking and very base. So this is what makes them so dangerous, because they have not absorbed or been culturalized with what we call a civil society. They're against that, so they are not a part of that. So don't think of them in those regards as if they are, because these folks have not had the training or the cultural perfecting to bring them into that sort of thinking. So understand what it is you're dealing with. Just because they look like a human and they act like a human doesn't mean that they have feelings of empathy and compassion and even any sort of conscience about these things, because it doesn't exist in them. So this all came about, has been blended, it's been taken to the next level with our current cartels and their cult leaders. But this was perfected a lot back in the mid-ages, I'm saying the 1500s, and especially after 1560, when the Lateran Council was completed, and that was when the Catholic Church agreed to, with the powers of the different states, the kings and the leaders of these different governments, that they would start forcing discipline into the ranks of their priests and trainees by forming seminaries to train these people to be priests and leaders of these churches that were growing very, very quickly throughout Europe and the northern Mediterranean areas. And it was starting to move actually into the sub-Saharan continent and things like that. But the government was upset, the governments were upset, because the church was kind of like running roughshod. There wasn't any real training to be a priest. A young guy just hooked up with an existing priest and kind of learned the craft from him, and that's how they became priests back in then. There wasn't a whole lot of formal training. Kind of how doctors were made and how other professions, bakers, other skills. It was just considered another one of those things to where you had an apprentice type of situation, you learned, and all of a sudden, one day everyone started calling you father. So this is how that sort of came about. Now, in that same time period, there was this sort of gap that was going on between the government leaders and the church leaders. There was this new ground in between that had to be tilled and laid low for construction to happen, in the relationships between these two organizations. And in a lot of these voids, Mafia type people started showing up. And they started becoming sort of like polite ambassadors between the needs of the government and bringing money into their coffers and having conformity in the countrysides from the people. And the same thing with the church was going on. So everyone was trying to establish control and power at this time. So the Mafia type people kind of came in and absorbed, did a lot of that middle stuff, did a lot of the dirty work. And what they were doing at that time is they were paying not only the government leaders, but they were also paying the church leaders. And we call these things tributes. Now, this is something a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's a dirty little, part of our history that goes on. It still goes on today. The Mafia and gang type people, they still use the tactics in some neighborhoods. Nice place you got here. Sure be a shame if somebody busted it up, type of thing. And then those guys end up leaving with an envelope full of the day's receipts. And the family is poorer for it, but at least their windows and store isn't going to be busted up overnight, at least for that night. So these are dirty little truths that are out there. Am I going to cure this? Are you going to cure this? No, but it helps if you're aware of it. So now the church, as I've said, is a cult. Everyone knows that churches are cults. There's good ways to run cults and there's bad ways to run cults. And unfortunately, with the Catholic Church, it's had a blend of both. And this past week or so, there was a fellow who died at the age of 94, named Theodore McCarrick. And a lot of people still call him Cardinal McCarrick. Although this was a very, very bad guy. He did some bad things. And he had a lot of people in his own grouping, or his own little cartel, if you will, of influencers, people who were molded by him and brought up under his administrative powers when he was in control. And a lot of these people had a lot of the same habits or a lot of the same tendencies, and they also helped cover for him. One of these guys, I'll talk about in a bit, he just stepped down from his role here in January, and another guy was brought in who's not any better than the one that just left. But McCarrick was a bad actor. He solicited sex in the confessional from different penitents coming in, and he led a dirty life. Lied about it up till the day he died. He said he had no recollection of having done anything like that, but they all said that he had dementia, and they all hid behind that. Well, they defrocked the guy, which meant he couldn't, do public masses anymore. But they didn't, kick him out. They didn't go all the way with it. They said, "Oh, that's penance enough to be defrocked." No, the guy actually belonged, in my estimation, probably in a federal or if not a state prison for the things that he did, and he was given a pass on this. Now, why did the church, the popes, and the folks in charge of the doctrine of faith give him such a lenient rope to basically leave public life and go retire in a place in Missouri and be left alone and not bothered anymore with these things? Well, it turns out Theodore McCarrick, I think it was between Benedict XVI and the administration here of Francis, $600,000 changed hands. I think it was in $200,000-$300,000 tranches, but that served as a very distracting tool to sort of take the grief and the penance that should have been coming down from the heads of this cult on one of their disloyal and wrongful servants. Instead of getting the piano tuning, the bow tie type of thing that the Mafia would have done, he's given a pass to go away, but he kept shoving money into the Pope's hands. Now, I got two questions. I said, why on earth is that not under investigation and that's not being questioned? And number two, how in the hell did a guy like McCarrick come up with $600,000 extra? I'm asking a question. I don't know if anyone's really got an answer out there, but that's not all he had. These cardinals end up with all kinds of money. I was doing some research into this, and they said that the average Catholic priest draws between $60,000 and $80,000 a year. The average bishop is up around $200,000 or more. And what a cardinal earns is whatever they can get away with, because nobody really knows what the cardinals take in, because so many people come along with the glad handshake. And I've been guilty of this too with different priests. I'd be in an outlying community and I'd see a priest was poorly funded, and I'd see they had rough shoes on after Mass or whatever. If I saw him out in a different setting, I'd give him the $100,000, not the $100,000, but the $100 handshake. I don't have that kind of money. Never did. But you get a $100 handshake. I say, "Hey, Father," I said, "I think you need to go look for a new pair of shoes." And they'd put it in their pocket, thankfully, and I wasn't the only one doing it. But with these other folks, the cardinals and stuff like that, they're getting $10,000 handshakes, $100,000 handshakes, $1 million handshakes, all for them to look the other way when these folks in their community are maybe doing some things that aren't maybe quite so proper. Maybe somebody might have been looking for an annulment from an unfavorable marriage. Nothing gets things done more quickly than a nice pile of green Benjamins. Not saying it's the rule, but I do know that it's happened. So when the news of this came out, and I want to talk about how fruit and trees, don't get too far separated from each other. The fruit never falls that far from the tree. So McCarrick had this really bad lifestyle. And he wasn't alone. There were a lot of other people in there. And I want to look at who is making the comments about this guy as it leads up to his actual burial. And I've been following some of the comments. And I thought it was very, very interesting that Cardinal Joseph Tobin of Newark came out with the statement about McCarrick's death. And I think it's very interesting because Tobin is one of the guys that helped cover for McCarrick all throughout his decline. Tobin has his own problems. Remember Night Night Baby, the text he sent while sitting on a tarmac getting ready to take off one night in an airplane? He was texting his gay lover, and he sent it out to an open texting to a group, and he got uncovered for that. Well, their story came up to be that Tobin was talking to his younger sister, and he'd always called his younger sister baby. Now, whether this is true or not, I think it's all BS, because a lot of the stuff this guy says is BS. And how do I know that? Well, my family was involved with Joseph Tobin when he was the Archbishop of Indianapolis. Now, this was quite a number of years ago, but a bad situation happened at that time down there. I have a nephew who is mixed race, and he was in a Catholic school, and another little girl came along, and he wanted to play. He was probably second grade at this point, so maybe 7, 8 years old. Just a totally innocent little kid, just very cheerful, very outgoing. He was, just that kid. Always had the big, broad smile on his face and always something positive to do. Well, he wanted to play, at recess or whatever, and this one little girl told him that she can't play with him because her dad says she can't play with ends. She came all out with it, and my nephew was just shocked because he didn't know what that was. He'd never heard it before. He had no idea what that was. So he thought that he was broken and needed to be ashamed. So he cried all the rest of the day till he got home, and then he told his mother what had happened. The teachers didn't listen. They just dismissed it. They didn't understand or come to this kid's aid. They basically squashed it and wanted it to go away. Well, not my sister-in-law. If anyone knows her, if you need a dirty job done, she's the one, because she will get in there and she will deal with it until it's all cleaned. No bleach needed, because she can sanitize the situation very, very quickly. She'll get to the dirt. She'll fix it. She's a nurse. So she got in there, and the school did nothing. They all basically told them that it was their family's problem. This wasn't a discipline issue. There was no problem at the school. Be quiet. Well, that was the last thing you tell my sister-in-law. So she went all the way to the archdiocese. They ended up getting their meeting with Joseph Tobin, and he, in his wisdom, told them that this isn't a church problem or a school problem. This is their family problem, because they haven't taught the kid to be black. Who in the hell comes up with that? Hopefully not your archbishop, but that's what this guy did. He blamed it on the family because they weren't raising the kid to be black. There wasn't a problem with the little girl and her family and her father. The problem was with our family. That's messed up. It's still messed up. This guy is a liar and a fraud, and he needs to be shut down too. But you think anything's going to happen? No. It'll never happen because he's playing the company game, the long game. Now, I talked a little bit about the guy that replaced McCarrick, also at the National Shrine to the Immaculate Conception of Washington, D.C., which, by the way, happens to be the final destination that we're hoping for this image to be in, to fulfill Our Lady of America's desires to be honored as Queen of our country. And she wants to be held there as Queen and Patroness of America in the National Shrine to the Immaculate Conception of Washington, D.C. Now, there's barriers to that. And what are the barriers? The barriers are the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. And who runs that? Well, one of McCarrick's other guys was a guy named Wilton Gregory. Wilton Gregory had been head of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. He was the Archbishop of D.C. Well, he sat down in January of this year, I think on the 6th of January, he sat down. And Francis, before he went into the hospital, he appointed Robert McElroy from San Diego. Now, all these guys have more than casual discussions and relationships with the LGBTQ communities. McElroy is no different. If anyone thinks that this statue is going to be getting into the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception anytime while these guys are in control, I think you're sadly mistaken. Now, that's frustrating for us, the faithful, but it's not so frustrating for God and for Mary. They have time. We don't have time. Our time runs out. But heaven has no inclination of time. Time doesn't matter in heaven. Heaven is. Heaven exists. Heaven remains. Heaven doesn't have a calendar. They don't have watches. Heaven just is. It will be forever. But with these guys, we have to remove and go in and cleanse these cults within cults. And why isn't the head cult, the church, clamping down on these guys to remove them? Well, one of the reasons is they're such prolific fundraisers. They bring in the scratch. They bring in a lot of scratch. And it's why these cardinals and why McCarrick can afford to shell out $600,000 to keep him out of the public fray in this and possibly help keep him out of prison. So they used the church as a cudgel against the state and said, we don't need to be discussing this. It's going to cause too much rancor and uproar. Let's just let bygones be bygones. You can't just pray this thing away. You got to take action on it. And this is where I think the cult people, and especially in this case here, what I'll call the Catholics, not just the Catholics, but the Catholics, the people who will take things so far to the extreme that they will virtue signal their way out of any bad situation. They'll say, well, we just need to pray for them. Well, you need to do that, but you also need to take action. So Jesus was a man of action. We should be too. I don't have the answers to this. I'm putting out the questions, but we're going to do more research on this. And we're going to tell you the whole story about these things. Alex is working on his things, Alex Fiato. He's been taking some time off to take care of some family things, and he's been doing some wonderful work here within the diocese of moving his Shroud of Turin exhibit around and helping to give long explanations and discussions on the topic. And it's bringing a lot of people to a greater awareness of how Jesus suffered as we're moving into our Easter week coming up next week. So everyone needs to prepare for this, but we need to be mindful of this, that the cartels in Mexico and the cults within the cults here within the church, they have a lot of things in common. The one thing they don't have in common is the drug trafficking. But we have to find out how these things came to be, that the other trafficking in illicit behaviors is allowed. And we have to stop this. We have to stop this because this is not purity in any form, in any shape, in any way of discussion. So be mindful of this. Pray for the repose of this man's soul. Hopefully he isn't in hell as we speak. Nobody wishes anybody to go to hell, but we do want people to be held accountable. So in the meantime, remember, I love you, and I'll be back.